Good morning, folks. If you've ever managed an organization or even just had people working under you, you'll notice that you weren't really able to monitor every decision that they make, right? You'll end up developing these decision-making rules or these proxies of performance that you adopt to make sure that things are going swimmingly under you for those who you are accountable to above you in the organization. And this is also true of bureaucracies. And unfortunately, the performance of public programs depends on the data collected. And data is not collected perfectly, nor is it processed perfectly. And even at the leadership of these organizations, they have to make decisions about whether to centralize decision-making and informally make rules about how the organization is to operate, or if they delegate those downward to subunits below them. When this is delegated, it's usually done with like formalized decision-making rules. And this is all part of an information problem, but really it's an attention problem, right? No individual alone can pay attention to all of the processes of large organizations that are needed to implement public programs. And this is really critical, particularly where goals of organizations are not clear. Actually, it's interesting. There was an article that came out in 2008 by authors named May, Workman, and Jones, and they were looking at the failure to adequately address Hurricane Katrina. And the proposal that they put forward was that an overcorrection and concern for national security following 9/11 led to a misdelegation of concern for natural disasters under DHS, and in the organization of that followed in 2002. And so that led to a failure to adequately address Hurricane Katrina. I don't know if I buy the argument. I haven't decided yet, but it does make an interesting point, which is that, you know, when focusing events in our society reorganize the goals that our organizations have, it often comes at the cost of other goals. So goals have to compete with each other to survive. You know, no organization has an infinite amount of resources. And it's kind of interesting because these goals, you know, it's not always self-evident whether or not they're decided by interest groups who are lobbying on behalf of bureaucracies, or whether or not these are developed from the leadership themselves, the decision makers of the organization. But anyway, going back to the information asymmetry thing, I noticed this in the way that Tulsa handled some of the CARES funds. A lot of the funds were part of these like contracts made with nonprofits, and what the process was basically that cities would put forward ideas for how to use CARES Act funds to address COVID in the city. But one of the interesting things about it is that the nonprofits were able to self-monitor, right? So the nonprofits were able to, in some ways, develop their own performance metrics and performance management systems, and then report those back to the city. Now, this is just looking at the documents that you can find online. It's possible that there's a more complex process at hand. But on the front end, that application from the nonprofit to the city, that was the process that was displayed. And if nonprofits and cities can trust each other and we have the same goals, then this may not be a problem at all. If there's different goals, it could be a serious problem. So one question that we have to kind of reflect on is who is to make all of these decisions when goals compete with each other? You know, because we're not going to have a referendum every time a focusing event happens, and we have to choose between giving resources to solve one problem instead of another. maybe one day that will be possible. And that's definitely worth considering. But for now, we're in a very limited decision-making structure. And unfortunately, a lot of the decisions are not made in places that we can adequately assess them. And it's funny, you know, like, I'm talking about the organizations not having the attention span to pay attention to every single process and every single goal, but really as citizens, it's impossible for us to look at every single organization all the time. We hope our representatives can do that, and we count on them to. Well, I am here, so I will talk to you all later.